Welcome to the first video in a series on how you can start your crypto journey and start investing in crypto. Today we're going to be talking about crypto basics. Now before we start, I just want to make it clear that this video is not going to be going in depth on the concepts of crypto, but it's more going to give you an overview so you feel comfortable enough following along other videos in this series, from setting up your first account with a centralized exchange to setting up your first non-custodial wallet and also doing transactions on a decentralized exchange. Now, the first concept that I want you to understand is blockchain. Every crypto that you hear or see is on a blockchain, and at the moment there are multiple blockchains. There is Ethereum, there is Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, Polygon. There is a bunch of them at the moment. So what makes it great? Blockchain is an immutable ledger that doesn't have a central governance. That means it's decentralized, and every transaction on a blockchain is recorded in a block, and those blocks create a certain order that forms sort of a chain. That's why it's called the blockchain. So how are the rules enforced then on a blockchain, and who decides whether a transaction should be recorded or not? Well, there is this thing called consensus, and there is multiple validator nodes, which is nothing but a bunch of computers that are all over the world, and depending on the blockchain, anyone can pretty much set up their own computer or server, which is going to be acting as a validator node for that blockchain, making it more secure and more decentralized. But each of them has their own rules for enforcing transaction. And based on the consensus mechanism, if the majority of the validator nodes decide that the transaction needs to go in a block, then it gets recorded in that block. And once it's recorded, you cannot reverse that transaction. That's why it's called immutable. Then how do you set the rules for them, and how do they know that a transaction is legitimate so it can go into a block? And that is written in a smart contract, which is another powerful concept of a blockchain. Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, all of them are using smart contracts because this is basically a way for you to enforce the rules on chain that's written in the code. And once that rule is met, then the transaction gets executed no matter what. And if you need to make changes to that rule, how do you change that rule? Well, the token holders for that blockchain, they vote on certain proposals to make changes to that smart contract. But once the vote is done, then the code is rewritten or the conditions get changed. And after they change, again, once somebody executes the transaction and it meets the criteria, then the transaction gets executed and nobody can stop it because it's written in the code. So let's say that in traditional finance, you go to a bank and you want to ask for a loan, and they give you certain criteria that they need you to meet. Let's say, for example, that collateral has to be 1.5 times the requested amount or something like that. And if you meet that criteria, they might still decide to reject you. But on a blockchain, once those conditions are written in the code, if you meet those conditions, there is no way they can stop that transaction. That's what makes it so great, that it is executed no matter what if you meet the criteria. And there is no central governance, such as a bank, that can simply deny you certain service just because they have the authority to do so. And the concept of smart contract is important to understand, because if you're going to be using decentralized exchanges, for example, all those exchanges that you're trying to do are written in the code in the smart contract. That way you know that nobody but a code is going to decide whether you can do certain transactions or not, whether you can exchange one crypto for the other, or maybe you can do staking, which is basically depositing your crypto to earn interest. The next concept that I want you to understand is gas fees, sometimes referred as gas. Gas fees is nothing but a fee that you pay on the blockchain once you try to execute a transaction. And these gas fees are paid to validator nodes for them to validate and add your transaction into a block, because the only incentive for the validator nodes to exist is if they make money. This is also a monetary incentive. And they set up validator nodes, and once the validator nodes execute a transaction or record your transaction, blockchain pays them in the currency that is used on that blockchain. So for instance, if you're executing a transaction on Ethereum, then they're going to get paid in ETH. Now, the amount of gas fees that you're going to pay is going to depend on many factors, but the main three are going to be the blockchain that you're going to be using. For instance, Ethereum is one of the most expensive blockchains out there. You can expect to pay anywhere between $5 to $100 per transaction, while Solana is one of the cheapest ones, where the transaction can cost anywhere from a fraction of a cent to basically 1 cent. Number two is going to be congestion. And congestion is when there are many users on the blockchain that are trying to get their transaction into that block. So then they're basically competing for that place in that block for their transaction to get executed. So it's a simple supply and demand. And number three is going to be the complexity of the transaction. Now, sometimes there are simple transactions such as sending crypto from one wallet to another. That is a pretty simple transaction. But sometimes there is staking, there is crypto exchange. You can also do borrowing, and then you can repay the loans. These are more complex transactions. Sometimes you can perform multiple transactions in a single transaction, which don't think about it too much yet, but there can be these type of transactions, and these are going to be very costly. Now, the next important concept that I want you to understand is decentralized exchanges, or DEXs. And that is basically a crypto exchange that runs on a smart contract on a blockchain. Now, there are many decentralized exchanges right now on many blockchains, but you might have heard about one of the biggest ones, which is Uniswap. Uniswap is the decentralized exchange that runs on Ethereum, or I mean, it started with Ethereum. Right now, it supports a little bit more layer 2s of Ethereum, but the main one is still Ethereum, and it's the biggest one on Ethereum. And once I show you how to create your own non-custodial wallet, you'll be able to use it with a decentralized exchange such as Uniswap or any other decentralized exchange that you like, so you can swap one crypto for the other without the use of the centralized exchange, so there's not going to be a central governance. Now, the last concept that I want you to understand here today is stablecoins. And stablecoins are important because sometimes this is a quick way for you to lock in your profits. What is stablecoins? Stablecoins is basically a coin on the blockchain that is pegged, or I guess traces, any other fiat currency or traditional currency, such as, for instance, US dollar. For US dollar, there are two major ones that you might have heard of, that is USDT and USDC. Those are just a couple of multiple other stable coins out there that are pegged to US dollar, meaning they keep the same value as US dollar at all times. Now, of course, there are multiple mechanisms supporting that level to the US dollar, and some of them, such as USDC, is supposedly backed by US dollar 1-to-1, while USDT is backed by something else that nobody else knows. But for the most part, it pretty much stayed on par with the US dollar throughout the history. Only maybe a couple times the depegging happened, but it got restored pretty quickly, so this should be relatively safe, but for the most part, it traces the US dollar perfectly. So again, it does involve some risk, but a lot of crypto investors move their money into stable coins, which is basically cashing them out on chain, instead of going through the whole process of sending it to a centralized exchange where you have to quickly convert it into cash, which takes up time. Sometimes it takes 10-15 minutes, and that can lead to the price fluctuating, and you're basically losing on your profit over there. So stable coins are still a great way to lock in your profits. That's why I still think it's important for you to understand that. All right, so I tried to compress a lot of information in this short video, and of course there's a lot more technical concepts out there about crypto that you can research on your own, or you can watch some of my other videos, but this should give you enough understanding for you to feel comfortable start setting up your first centralized exchange. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, there are multiple centralized exchanges out there, but some of the most popular, and probably the most popular here in the US, is Coinbase. And that's the one we're going to be using for our next video to see how we can set up an account and start trading crypto. If that video is already out by the time you're watching this video, then please go ahead and check it out. If not, check out some of my other videos on the channel. In the meantime, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel down below, and hit notification bell to get notified I post a new video. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.